Well, first of all, which tribe?
Well, my mom is Caddo and Delaware, and my dad's Cherokee and Creek. So, together, us boys are Cherokee Creek, Caddo, and Delaware.
Dang.
Yeah. But we really only know most about the Cherokee Creek and Caddo side. The Delaware is kind of lost.
Because of the Trail of Tears, I'm guessing?
No. No. I just mean that we don't know much about it as a family.
Okay.
There's no one who is really there to teach us about the Delaware side of things. But growing up where my mom grew up at, there's a lot of Caddo people. So she knows more or less about the Caddos. And my dad, my grandma is Cherokee, and his dad, my grandpa, is Creek. Oh, no, I got those mixed up. My grandpa's Cherokee.
Yeah.
And my grandma's Creek.
I mean, I mentioned the Trail of Tears more because most of the Native Americans that were moved were like on the East Coast, and then
right.
So Delaware was my assumption.
Yeah,
I'm not that racist, I hope.
No, it's all right.
And so, what are some trends that are sort of like a constant in those cultures?
Something you really, I guess, find, and this is just from what I've observed. I'm not an ethnologist or anything.
Yeah.
That almost all the tribes care about the well-being of those who can't take care of themselves.
Yeah.
And they happen for different reasons. Some tribes are more warrior-like, and so if the fathers die in battle, but some, if there's a sickness, if there's a widow or an orphan or someone who can't take care of themselves, then almost all the tribes are saying, hey, we need to take care of this person. And that really, the whole community is a big family.
Yeah.
And like, in a sense that we don't know here in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
We have our own family groups, but as far as an entire community working towards something.
We're generally like tiny tribes of just kind of not even really extended family anymore. It's really just the immediate family, and then our uncle's a bum, and just kind of screw that guy. I mean, how big did the tribes get, like, themselves?
They're supposed to, the larger tribes were supposed to have numbered in the millions. As for what the exact numbers are, I don't know.
Because I think that, dang it, Corey brought it up in a previous podcast, but there's a number to where humans can remember a certain like amount of people, and it's somewhere near 100. And so I would imagine that as the tribes themselves that, you know, sort of calls themselves Creek or Cherokee or whatever, they would, you know, sort of, yes, be the same tribe, but sort of have smaller communities within it, because humans just can't deal with that many people at the same time. Yeah.
Well, no, they had villages and things like that where they would all be their own group together.
Sure.
And they did have, though, large gatherings of people. So, like the Cherokees who lived in the Smoky Mountain area, they did have different tribes and villages.
Yeah.
And so you could have different tribes cohabitating in the same place. But for the most part, they just stuck together with their own tribe. But the villages were all connected by messengers who go back and forth. And so even though you harvested and hunted separately as a village, a couple of times throughout the year for different ceremonies, like the green corn ceremony, they would all come together at certain locales, like the villages would move together and celebrate together. And not all of them, but like the surrounding villages would gather together. So it was a large gathering in some places.
At what point do the villages or like different tribes sort of like go, hey, you're not like us, and so like, because I don't know how concrete the distinction is between, oh, we're Cherokees and you're Blackfoot, and so like we're not the same, because once it gets large enough, can they really even tell?
You can tell different tribes based off of a couple of different things. As far as how they live together, though, it is definitely broken up by territory, that different tribes inhabit different territories. Yeah. And for the most part, it was known amongst them that, hey, this is their place and this is our place. Okay. And so we just stay here and they stay there. And it rarely ever got conflictive. Yeah. Unless there was a shortage of resources. Exactly. And they weren't willing to work together. That was usually whenever combat happened.
Yeah. That's something that because Ryan mentioned in Sex at Dawn that early hunter-gatherers didn't really have a lot of reason to have war or conflict, especially because what's there to fight about whenever you have more than enough to eat, right? More than enough, So, what? You're here, so yeah, why not? Let's just share until there's not enough. I would imagine that's just, for me, that's just a basic of human nature, at least what I believe, that I think that humans are loving and caring, and it's just the conditions of the environment that have turned us into sort of the nasty, brutish, short, and selfish is what the Leviathan said. That I don't know, this perception that humans are like death machines or whatever.
Well, I will kind of say this, that and also in a way that we don't know because we don't treat our soldiers this way or have them act this way, but there were tribes who, being a brave warrior was one of the highest honors that you could have, and it was how you became chief or looked up to at all. Yeah. That you couldn't really speak as a man unless you had gone to war. But war as they knew it is different than war as we knew it. The wars were never fought to totally exterminate a threat. They were usually fought just to settle a dispute. And that even the fighting itself is different than we know it. The fighting that we do with other countries is rarely done just to maim or to pacify. Usually we go right for the kill. Yeah. And that with a lot of different Native American tribes, and I'm thinking of Plains tribes specifically, they would do things like count coup, which is during combat, if you were fighting someone or if you had snuck up on somebody and you could obviously take them out, the person who was attacking would touch you on the shoulder, and then you would know that you could have died right there. Yeah. And so it's your duty as a warrior. This is like a code or oath amongst the warriors that you're supposed to leave the battle and not return. Dang. You're counted as having been able to have been killed then. Yeah. And things like that get you war honors. Most people think of the headdresses when they think of Indians. Usually for tribes that use headdresses, each feather is a war honor. And so if you count coup on somebody, then it's essentially acknowledged that you could have killed this person. Yeah. And so in fighting, in combat, you had the chance to spill blood, but that you didn't. It speaks to your ability to be a warrior, but also to your mercy to not kill somebody. Yeah. But the fact is that they still did kill each other sometimes, though. If you didn't have the ability to count coup, if you had two guys who just weren't going to back down from each other, then they did fight, and they did fight to the death. Yeah. But usually combat like that didn't happen, though, unless there was some kind of dispute. It was never fighting just for the sake of fighting or to gain more power. Yeah. You didn't do it just because you wanted something that someone had. It was because either we're about to die and we need whatever it is that they have, or they did something to one of our people and we have to settle this. And it was usually always talked out. You never fought there were no skirmishes. Yeah. Everything was talked out and politicked, that if we can avoid fighting here, then we will. But, it didn't always happen like that.
Because, it's strange to think that, at least from my point of view of how I would like humanity to be, is that, avoid war at all costs. Yeah. Avoid killing at all costs. And so it's hard to think what would happen, or I guess what did happen between tribes that sort of had pretty much everything that they needed, but just, maybe cultural, dispute, disrespect, or just why would someone, go over here and kill one of these guys or something to start a war. I just, it's hard to sort of think of the initial fire starter in sort of the war of that eventually became the idea of human nature, you know? I mean, I think that it would probably have begun with resources, but as sort of culture expands and sort of we put value in things that are not as concrete, I guess. I describe it as culture because it's something that's not quite so like live or die, but it's something that you appreciate. So certain things like rituals and stuff that, you know, a more advanced society would have, you know, developed like a tribe, but whereas if you go further back in evolution, that you have something more like just a hominid type human that would just not really know anything like other than just kill a thing and eat it. Like, and so again, I'm just going to what I think that, you know, once humans got much smarter and started developing these cultures and these tribes in the way that, you know, as we know Native American tribes to be now, I think that, you know, the culture and stuff that becomes so rich comes from a very like intelligent place rather than like the stupid idea that like white people have of like the savages, you know. Sorry to like the big rant there.
That's all right.
I don't know. What do you think?
About which part?
Any of it?
Give me something to start off with.
I guess there's a bridge between what became sort of the pre-human nature, like, or the civilized part, and I mean civilized at least starting at like language.
Well, I guess that's kind of where you would run aground if you were talking to someone who believes like the old ways. They would say that the Indians, Native Americans, Native American is kind of an outdated term now too. They use the term First Nation people.
Okay.
And so if you were talking to like an elder, they would say that the people had always been there, that there was no that there was no caveman or animal form pre-human. They would say that there were worlds before this one, and the people were there also.
Yeah.
But that their multiple tribes have the same stories about like a world destroyed by water and a world destroyed by ice, and that like the one to come will be destroyed by fire. That there were people before and they got too greedy or they were doing something wrong.
Yeah.
And that they were essentially, the world was cleansed.
Yeah.
That's also a common belief, is that Mother Earth Mother, whatever you want to call it, is a living thing.
Yeah.
That it's not just a hunk of minerals and a molten core, but that it has its own like heartbeat and rhythm.
Yeah.
And that whenever people pollute it or do too much to it, it has ways of cleansing itself, just like our bodies have ways of cleansing itself. And so that people did something to upset the balance before, and the earth had to renew itself. And that each time that it did, that the creator or God or whatever you want to call the great above formed man out of the dust as he is and set them in their places.
Yeah.
So there really is no knowledge. They have knowledge of their pasts. At least they did back then.
Yeah.
And they kept them by winter count. And it did stop at one point, but everything like whatever you want to call their culture, agrarian or hunter-gatherer, the stories get a little blended together, but they also have their like unique distinctions too.
Yeah.
They say that they go back to the time whenever men could still talk to plants and animals.
Yeah.
And so as far as the elders, or if you're trying to follow the traditional beliefs, as far as those are concerned, people have always been the way that they are. And that the rituals that we have, they don't necessarily stem from, like, the sun rises and plants grow and unfold whenever the sun comes up. So the sun must be responsible for the plant growing. It's not like the rituals developed. Now we have like a sun dance based around that. There are, and I don't want to like talk too much about this because I'm no expert. You're not supposed to if you don't know a lot, but that the shaman, quote unquote, medicine men, medicinal healers, herbal practitioners, they have a lot of names, but that they commune directly with a spirit world. And it's not drug induced. Like a lot of people think that there's a thing called like peyote church, and that you don't have to be on herbal substances, but that there are guys who communicate with the spirit world. Yeah. And so if you're taking it at that fact that if they talk to something outside of our realm of existence, something non-material, and they tell you that that's how it was, then you're inclined to believe that that's how it was. So, I mean, science says a lot of things, but there are a lot of things that it can't explain that Native Americans take on faith. Like, they can't find the missing link. And they can't explain, they can find hominid species in different parts of the world, they're fossils, but no one can explain how Homo sapiens, as we are, just magically appeared all over the planet. That if we had really lived in, like, civilizations like we do, and we developed similarly on different continents, that you would find the same skeletons and the same amount of fossils in the same volume all over the world. But finding those more primitive, ape-like or mammalian skeletons, that those Native Americans would say those were something else. That we people, as we are, people in Africa and Asia and Europe and North America, South America, that they were all put there, that we all were placed where we're supposed to be. And they take that on faith that that's how it was. And so whenever people, like, if you're driven by knowledge and science and facts, that you have to deduce that this is the missing link between humans. This is where humans crossed over to where we were, and then to where we like interbred with the other species or whatever to make what we are now. You can't say for sure that what it is until you find out.
Exactly.
But Indians take a lot of things on faith like that.
And I'm no expert on evolutionary biology or anything, so I can't say that I do know or that I don't know enough about.
No one knows.
So
no one knows as far as science is concerned. No one does know.
And I don't know even remotely enough to like take a jab at it, so I'm not even gonna. One question that does come to mind is that how do you sort of intermingle your Indian heritage with your faith?
It's a very hard issue to tackle. My grandpa, he was a avid churchgoer before he passed away, but whenever I would ask him about it, he would say that Indians had their own faith before colonial Christian faith. But he was a follower of Christ. And so I would kind of pick his brain as to how he could reconcile the two. And he could never really give me a direct answer. But maybe his answers were, in their own way, something for me to figure out as my life goes on. But he would talk to me about, like, the stomp dance faith of the Cherokees. That they would gather for their stomp dances. And that they would go to water, which is like a cleansing, right? That you do before and after things like that. And that you commune with the spirits in a sweat lodge. And there are a lot of different things that the Cherokees did. And so none of those are really seen by colonials as, faith. They just thought that it was, you were doing it just because it's what your tribe did. And it was a dirty, uncivilized thing that you did. They didn't see, like, the logic really, or even what it was that was actually happening. They just saw that this is different than what we do, and what we do is right, because Jesus was right. But, and a lot of chiefs, at least, that I've read, at least as far as, like, Chief Joseph and Sitting Bull, they would say that they were better Christians than the white people were before they got there and learned about Jesus. As far as trying to not kill, to not steal, to not blaspheme the creator.
Sure.
You know, all those things Indians were already trying to do.
Yeah.
Respect your father and mother. All those things they were trying to do before they learned about the 10 Commandments.
Yeah.
Not because, you know, they just developed it, but because they were brought up and told by their people and by their medicine men that that's the right thing to do. That's how you're supposed to live.
Yeah.
It's better for everyone if you live that way.
Exactly.
But whenever you start introducing things like personal possessions and alcohol,
that's actually one of the first things that I thought of. That like, dude, would they even have like, oh, don't steal? It's like, well,
they did
that's not really hard to not steal, you know.
Yeah, they did have personal things, I guess, that could be coveted somewhat.
Sure.
But if you were to like take it, everyone would know about it.
Exactly.
And there's no way to like live or get away with it unless you run away.
Yeah.
They're either going to take it back from you or, you know, say, hey, you can't be here if you're going to live life like that.
Exactly.
And so, you know, to survive in the group, to be part of the group, you had to go along with
exactly
what everyone was doing, and it was just better that way.
Yeah.
So kind of a twofold.
So I mean, what parts, like, what's kind of some of the bigger things that you take out of that part of your culture and that you also sort of bridge?
Well, the fact that Christ didn't, by name that we know of, come to the First Nation peoples is something that Indians have a hard time coping with, and that non-Indian people have a hard time trying to, you know, explain what it is that you did and how it mixes with what I do. It's not something that people regularly talk about, but I've read a couple of different books about it. One was about a guy he knew about the traditional ways, and where on his mission, the Rosebud Reservation, the mission there was Catholic. And so he had this was, I think, in the 60s, he had meetings where the medicine men would meet with the priests and they would talk about different tenets of their faith. And so he drew a lot of similarities. There are a lot of parallels between them.
Yeah.
Like, there are Christ-like figures in a lot of different Native American lores.
I feel like that's something consistent in a lot of religions, that there's someone who like sacrifices themselves for others, or there's a lot of like virgin births even, but not in the same way that I don't know, just interesting the trends in cultures and religions that happen that way.
Yeah. That's true. I think it was like in Egypt, the god Horus, that he had 12 guys who would go around with him, and he was also killed and resurrected.
Yeah, there's a real big similarity with Horus. But the way I've seen it explained is it has to do with constellations and like the zodiac has to do like 12 of the zodiac and the sun and all of that. But that's a really long explanation that we don't have to get into right now.
Okay.
Because I also want you to finish what you were saying.
Anyway, so as far as like, it is hard to mingle the two, that, you know, you have to accept that Christ didn't, in the form that we recognize as Jesus, come to the Native Americans. You know, people wonder, does God have different emissaries for different people? Like the Lakota, they have the buffalo woman, the white buffalo woman, and she was the one who originally gave them the first pipe. And the pipe is what you smoke specifically whenever you have a special prayer to send up. And that it's a very holy thing to do, but that whenever she brought it, that she was also teaching that you have to be more respectful to each other and that you have to not harm each other. And so, like, as far as what they were doing before that, no one really can say, because we don't have anyone who knows those stories.
Sure.
A lot of the stories that you hear are either way before, like before time, almost this like primeval era of mankind, and whenever we learned all the things that we learned. But it's hard to fill in the gaps to where we got to where we are now, because there are people who still know stories of the old winter counts, but not so far back that they could tell you everything from then to here.
Yeah.
Just because that's impossible to do. But whenever I see, like, I go to a powwow, I definitely feel a spiritual presence there. It's hard to... It gets kind of scary. For a while, whenever I first started learning about that stuff, I wondered if it was that what my people were doing was misled. If, like, the spirits that they were listening to really had their best interest in mind.
Yeah.
But I also look at my people before colonialism.
Yeah.
And that they did try to live really moral lives.
Yeah.
They weren't, like man-eaters or rapers or anything.
Yeah.
That they tried to live what I consider like a surprisingly moral life compared to other cultures. Compared to other primitive forest dwellers or... whatever, if you want to call them primitive people.
Sure.
That they had a really good sense of morality and what it was to take care of one another. And so I see that, and those are the same virtues that we strive to have as Christians.
Sure.
I don't see how you could have those things and pursue them for their own sake. Because, I mean, if you're looking at it from a survival perspective, it's better for you to just have all the stuff and you guarantee your life for longer. Well, it's not good as a group, but it's better for an individual, I guess.
And that's actually an argument that I have thought of pretty deeply into, that humans do depend on each other. And it's shown both evolutionarily, like from the way that our brains sort of react whenever we're alone, that our brains literally just start breaking whenever we're in solitary confinement, and people just start going crazy, and babies literally die whenever they're not touched. That whole human contact thing is sort of very important, which is why I still, to me, love is the meaning of life. And so that human interaction is sort of crucial to what makes us, that we require each other. And at least based on the trends of like evolution and stuff, that if we were to have been as solitary as that sort of, selfish morality would dictate, then we wouldn't have evolved in the way that we did. And so at least I think that we developed as tribes, and so that sort of morality sort of comes out of working in a tribe. And so starting from the simple logical perspective of just, I can do this many things, but if someone else does this other thing, then we both get more out of it with each other. And so whenever you start there, you can keep going. And so, we get 5 people, and these 5 people together, the sort of communist logic that, like, more people do work and they all get more out of it, so they all do less work. And that continues to work as a community. And yes, as it breaks down, like, one person can be more selfish, and then that balance sort of starts to break. But that's why you sort of put in place these moral sort of rules that go, hey, if you do that, you're kind of screwing it up for everyone. And so that's sort of consistent, I think, in sort of tribe thought. And so the whole sharing is good, being caring to everyone is good, does sort of stem from a survival thing, because you can take all the food for yourself, but then your friend that was much better at hunting than you were starves to death, and then now you suck at hunting, so you're going to starve to death. So it's much better to help each other out, because together we can do so much more than we can alone.
I kind of have I think that that idea, that thought process, the train of thought that you're going on is correct. But that, like, because we're human and we're only limited, our sphere of influence is very small, and we do have that ability to care about others and want to share with each other, but I feel like it only extends to our sphere of influence, like the people that we care about most. Just because whenever you know the people that you know, but whenever you come up to someone new, you don't know if you can trust them or not. Sure. And if everyone had the same idea, the same mentality that we're all human and we're all in this together, then it wouldn't matter.
Yeah.
But because we don't, we come up to someone new, and if they're unfamiliar, we don't want to share with them because we don't know who they are.
Sure.
Or what they're like, and if they're going to share equally with us, if we're just going to dump our resources into someone who's not going to return. It makes you want to be greedy and just share with your people around you.
But the logic extends, like, if I have that same line of thinking, that and I arrived there just through logic, like, this is the way that things have worked, and so that's how that came out. And so I don't think that anyone else should be too far from that themselves either. That I'm not that different. I'm not a unique snowflake. I'm not. There's 7.1 billion people on the planet. So other people can reach that same of thought themselves.
They can. But I mean, as humans, though, we're prone to impulsive selfishness. Like you said with the hunter-gatherer, yeah, if you think about it, your friend who hunts really well can help you ensure both of your survival for a long time to come. Mm-hmm. But in the moment, whenever you're both hungry and you have the opportunity to fill yourself, I mean, unless you've been strictly taught and thought to, act otherwise, you're going to want to just take the food for yourself. And not that it's the right thing to do, but just that it happens.
Sure.
And it did happen with Indians too. I mean,
yes.
The morality was there, and it was, as a tribe, it was a tribal thing. Mm-hmm. That's why they were able to have villages and tribes. But that you couldn't... But if someone was new and strange, you had to learn about them before you could just give up your things to them. Like whenever they would fight, if they had to fight other tribes and they took like prisoners, as they would often do instead of just killing them, you would be inducted into the tribe once you were deemed trustworthy. Yeah. And so like we should all give each other a chance to,
sure,
but that just because of how we are, our impulsive selfishness will lead some astray.
I mean,
like the few weak links in the chain keep everything from coming together like it should, and it should come together like that.
Yeah. I mean, I find it perfectly okay to have, to be a little skeptical of novelty. But that is also what drives us forward. Also on a purely genetic level, that if we all just kind of stuck in one tribe that we just knew the whole time, then we would just become inbred and genetically deteriorate. And so what it seems is that there is a level of expanding and embracing the novelty in order to continue moving forward.
If you can make your mind think as a group that we should do this, absolutely. But I mean, there's no, I think of if we're going to go like to nature, in nature, there's no group that for the good of the species gives up or works together to help itself. Ants are the closest thing I can think of, and there's only one of them that reproduces. They act more like a singular animal. But like if you have praying mantises, they're going to eat each other. They would eat each other to extinction if they had to, because they don't have that higher thought process just off of their instinct.
But cells don't have a thought process at all, and they do that in your body right now.
They do.
I think I talked to Livy about this before we had recorded, but there seems to be a trend towards wanting to act as a single organism as humanity. That I think even the goal of like the United Nations and like world peace is to sort of act as a single organism. In the same way that our bodies sort of regulate and work with ourselves, regardless of, like, the thought process behind it. It's just, hey, this is what needs to happen so that we function. And it's not even... there's no thought behind it. It just happens. And it's a little bit silly for me, or at least sounding, but I'd embrace the singularity. If the robot overlord that has infinite knowledge is like, hey, assimilate, I'd be like, okay. Because that, to me, that's the goal. To sort of work in the same way that the organism does. And that every single cell in our body has its own purpose, and it meets that purpose, and it works better for the whole.
Yeah, I'd be down with that.
So, I mean, I don't know who it was that... It might have been you that did the metaphor... No, the metaphor of, like, if a blood cell tried being a brain cell or something, and it would just like, hey, I'm gonna go be a brain cell now, and just goes over there, and the brain cells are like, nope, you can't be a brain cell, and it'll just mess stuff up because that's not what it is. Mm-hmm. I feel as though, and this can devolve very quickly into, like, eugenics, but which I don't condone. But if we all sort of work together and work as an organism, that we are sort of able to work in our best way as a human species. Definitely. Rather than, like, countries and tribes.
I think that's definitely the ideal. The only, like, wild card that I see that people just can't handle is what comes after this. What came before this and what comes after this. Mm-hmm. That alone is, like, probably the driving force behind people being so diverse. Mm-hmm. That there's really not that much difference between us all. Mm-hmm. We all, eat, drink, and sleep and want to have some kind of companionship in our lives and something to show for it, like a family or a mm-hmm. career or something. But the thing that we just can't agree on is what comes before this or after this. And as easy as it would be to just say, well, hey, we don't know. Yeah. People can't accept that. It's just something that, because we have that fear of the unknown. Yeah. Nothing is more novel than, like, something you will never know while you're here. And so because we can't accept it, people, like, they come together and think similarly. But if you believe that you go to heaven after you die, or if you believe that God gives you a planet that you're to populate after you die, or if you believe that there's, 70 virgins for you after you die, if someone believes differently than you, then, that alone is enough to drive the wedge between our civilization. But no, you're absolutely right, though. We should all, like, it shouldn't be a problem for us to all come together, do, everyone have their own job. Mm-hmm. And do things, because that's, like, the best way that we'll get anything done is if, we can't all do the same thing. No. So if we all, work together, had our specific tasks, mm-hmm. that it shouldn't be a problem, that we should all be able to live together.
And it's funny because, I mean, I don't believe in anything. What came before? Nothing. I mean, before me, at least. To me, the likelihood, or the probability, is not much. And afterwards, the probability, at least, indicates nothing as well. And so, you say that, like, it's really hard for people to accept that. And I'm fine.
If you had talked to a spirit that told you that there was a world to come, and that your forefathers and that whoever goes before you is waiting for you to return to them, I mean, like, you're compelled to believe that. But if someone tells you that, that's wrong, you have something to disagree on, for some reason people can't just agree to disagree on a lot of things.
Well, agreeing to disagree doesn't solve anything.
If you can ignore temporary problems for like the greater good,
sure,
it would seem like a good thing.
It solves the immediate problem, but it just pushes it down the timeline so that it just becomes a bigger problem later.
Hence the wedge of what drives like what should be a beautiful system apart. Yeah, we do have borders and like seas and country labels and stuff, but like you said, that stuff shouldn't matter. We should all be able to come together and be like, hey, that's my brother across the sea. It's not just some foreign guy with different rights than I have.
Yeah.
We should all see each other as, family like that.
And
but we don't.
Yeah. You mentioned the spirit coming to tell me something, and I guess it depends on at what point in my life it would have come, because if it were to come to me now, I would be incredibly skeptical, period. I would just be like, there's lots of things that have counter evidence to this, and I will need to see a lot more evidence to then disprove this.
Do you think that people could ever have a limit of when the skepticism ends, though? Like, there's a lot of Christian miracles, too, like non-native based things that happen, but everyone has an explanation. How many times does like the impossible have to happen before it no longer becomes explainable away that it was indeed an outside force that involved this? There are numbers that you can run, but for some people, the odds, no matter how insurmountable, there's still that one in a Googleplex chance.
Well, quantum physics dictates that probability is just a gigantic. It's just everything is probable, at least a little. There was a joke in Big Bang Theory that Penny told, and it was a man sits at a bar for a while and offers a drink to the stool next to him. And the bartender has seen this for a while, and he's like, why is it that you always get a drink for the stool next to you? And he's like, well, I'm a scientist, and probability dictates that there's a tiny chance that the atoms above the stool there could suddenly materialize into a beautiful woman to whom I would have offered a drink already. And then the bartender says, well, couldn't you just talk to a woman? He was like, yeah, but what are the chances of that happening?
That's a good one.
Yeah. But
I mean, if that's your logic point, then like, why pursue anything then if everything is just equally possible?
Not equally possible.
Not equally possible, but if anything is possible, like, is there any way to have something besides logic that dictates, what you do if there's a small chance of anything happening? Like, how many times does that small chance have to happen before you know that it's not just happenstance that this happens?
Well, yeah, that's probability. You can just compare numbers. And so, how many times do I let go of something and it fall to the ground for me to go, all right, whenever I let go of something, it'll fall to the ground. And, the more that we explore and go, well, what about if I'm in space? And let go of a thing and then, oh, look. So there's lots of variables constantly going into a big mess of what our experience of the universe is. But there's a book by Lawrence Krauss that I listened to, but not very attentively because I'm not a quantum physicist. And it basically said that there's a really good reason for why scientists have this belief that the universe came from nothing. And he explained a whole bunch of science that a whole bunch of people have worked on, and it went mostly over my head because I'm not a quantum physicist. But what it did tell me is all right, there's a whole lot of science behind this that I don't know, and they kind of have been doing it all their lives and kind of know what they're talking about a lot better than I do. So, coincidence is probably just that. At least, and I say probably in that sense of the word. Mm-hmm. That probability is just that. And so that I do sort of base my beliefs most logically off of that, in that what the probability, what the likelihood of things seem to me is, all right, this seems more likely, this seems less likely. For me to be driving home and experience a purple elephant in the middle of the road and hit it is much less likely than me just driving home. Mm-hmm. And if I were to believe that a purple elephant was going to appear in the road between Memorial and 122nd on Council, then I would take a different route home. If I actually believe that. Mm-hmm. But I don't. And that's kind of where belief bridges into behavior. And so sort of to bring that back to what we were talking about, like human nature and why humans don't connect in that way, it's our beliefs very much do affect our behavior and how we act, how we treat each other. And so if we do believe that black people are inferior to white people, that affects our behavior in the same way that believing that your wife is at home. Those are two beliefs that you can have, and one of them is more true than the other. Does that make sense? And so, for humans to come together, there is a number of these beliefs that do need to come together so that we can actually interact better as an organism. Does that make sense?
Well, I guess there's one more thing. Like, for people to live together, they have to act harmoniously.
Yes.
They all need to do something that contributes to the greater good. Mm-hmm. And certain things need to be covered before others, like food, water, shelter.
Of course.
But all of those things, when done together, they produce a community that, acts like an organism.
Yes.
You have to wonder to what end. And in that, if love is the meaning of life, then, where does it spring from? Where does it come from? Mm-hmm. In a world, in the natural world that is, very lacking in love. There are millions more organisms that don't show love and compassion in a way that we recognize.
Yeah.
Than ones that do. And there are others that do.
Yeah.
But for something like that to exist, to become a very efficient machine, you would have to act like an organism.
Yeah.
But showing compassion and love, those aren't things that just make things better. Emotions cloud the judgment of people, and love is one of those. Love can make you do ridiculous things, but so can hatred. But the fact that both of those are there to mess with your brain would dictate that to be an emotionless person and work for the better of the community is much more efficient than what it is to have emotions and to care. Whenever I think about a community that loves each other, they're bonded and they mourn whenever someone dies, and they cry tears of joy whenever there's a new life added.
Of course.
And at least in the communities that I like to think of. But that they don't just say, welcome, new citizen. Welcome to the machine. You will have a job placed for you, which will better the environment.
Yeah.
Try not to get too attached because that messes with your job.
I don't seek to suck the emotion out of everything because I am also a very emotional person.
Mm-hmm.
I think that
I only say that to emphasize that the things that you feel and the sensations that you get mean more than just what your place is, where you work at, or what your role is in the world. That there's more to it than working. There's not a one goal to get to.
Sure. To me, at least, is because I like it.
I like it too.
It's enjoyable.
Yeah.
Being with people and contributing to each other, caring for another, showing compassion towards one another is enjoyable to me.
It is. It brings a sense of fulfillment.
Yeah. And, you could explain it to death to where it's no fun anymore, or you could just enjoy it. I do a little of both. And, at different times, it's also enjoyable to explain it away to death.
I think you're unique in that way then, Santiago, because, to a person who, has to boil it down, there's no middle ground, and you can enjoy the sort of middle area. But if you are only based off of cold, hard facts, then we should be machines to further better, the community as a whole, and that not cloudy with emotions. But someone who's contrary to that would say, why would you only do that? Life's meant to be enjoyed and fulfilled, and to think about everything logically. You can't explain my love and the feelings I have, but I want to have them anyways. Those are two opposites that you can seem to find the blending in, but I think that you're unique in that way that I haven't seen in other people. Whenever I think about things like that, that to me blends a lot of those together. I try to live in that space because things do have to happen for a reason. You do things to make other things happen in the world. You want to influence things so that they happen the way you want them to. But that some things can't be explained. And I don't think that the people who have to have a reason for everything can accept that love and emotions are there for whatever reason they want to have. The only thing that I know is, and I say that I know this, that God gives us these emotions, that there's something from the above. We're not driven by instinct. That animals do a lot of what they do because it's their instinct to survive that way. They make choices based off of what they think will help them get to the next day. And so also the driving force of life, that they have offspring. It's not enough for them to just enjoy their lives, quote unquote, to eat their fill and be safe for the night. That's not what they live for. They live to have offspring and move on in the world. They know that their time is short, that they need to have offspring, and that they'll die and their kids will live on. But that we're not driven like that. We do want to have families and communities or something similar to that, whatever it may be. But that we're not driven solely by that. We do have love and hate and bitterness and joy and all these things, the feelings that you have, the love for your mom or for your dad or for your brothers or sisters, that all those things can't be explained. I can't explain those with logic and numbers as much as I would like to, because then maybe you could make people believe that they're supposed to feel those things.
I think I can, but continue.
I feel like if you're a numbers person and if you can only think logically, and I don't think anyone is a robot at birth, but that if you're going to feel that way, then you have to live in ignorance of your emotions. You can acknowledge them, that they're there, but you can't explain them. Therefore, you just have to accept that they're there and try to explain everything else in the world, which is contradictory to what that person should be doing. They should be trying to explain everything with numbers. So you have to live blindly to one thing while trying to explain away every other thing with something else. I can't live like that.
I think there's...
And I'm not saying you live like that.
No, yeah. There's a leap happening there. And you're making the leap between cold, hard facts and not feeling anything. And facts don't feel anything because they just are.
Mm-hmm.
But we do feel, and we have to live with facts, whether we like it or not.
Right.
And another fact is that we do get to enjoy things. That's a fact.
Mm-hmm.
We can enjoy things, or we can't. That's still within the range of possibilities. Another fact is that nice things are nice.
Mm-hmm.
At least from my observation of the world.
I like nice things.
Yeah. So, just because the cold hard facts say, oh, that love that you feel for your significant other, that's just, endorphins in your brain or whatever. And it's like, yeah. But it's nice.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll enjoy it. Like, just because there's a reason for it and just like an answer for it doesn't take away the good experience that comes from it anyways.
But see, I don't think that everything can be explained. Like, I could see how you could explain love, that it's some kind of bonding mechanism and it makes you want to ensure the survival of your offspring better. But what about hatred and bitterness? Those don't ensure the survival of your offspring. You're more likely to make a rash decision and get yourself maimed or injured, which will hinder you from also helping your offspring. There's things that I really can't explain other than they're like a perversion of your natural feelings. I mean, I can't explain all those away. And so, I'm trying to rebuttal both camps that you can live with emotions, but like you said, you still have to accept that there are facts in the world. Mm-hmm. Not everything is faith-based. Some things are just because of RNG. That's just the way it happens. But also, if you're trying to tell me that science can explain everything, explain all of our emotions. I can't see anything to explain all those away except for, to me, that explains is that they're the fingerprints of God. Sure. That God gives us emotions and we're not machines just driven.
To me, neuroscience is getting really, really close to that. Mm-hmm. And yeah, there's a lot there. And I mean, and again, that still does not take away from the fact that I enjoy having friendships with people, and I enjoy playing games with people, and I enjoy hugging my girlfriend. I still enjoy those things. I'm a very emotional person. I cried twice watching Little Prince the other night. But, and then afterwards, Sable and I were like, that was good. And yeah, I could still break it down and be like, oh, well, these things connected to these things in my brain and blah, blah, blah. And there's some answers that we haven't pinned down yet, but are pretty close to. But I still enjoy it. The facts don't take away from how nice it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and I don't want to detract from what other people believe, because that also makes them enjoy the world, and it also has them be better people. There's one of the biggest reasons that I'm not a horrendously militant, annoying atheist is because I enjoy having friends. And if I were to just do that all the time, it would be incredibly annoying for my friends and for me, because I would have to go through that rigmarole every freaking time.
Some people seem to enjoy it, though.
Gosh, I don't.
That's what they like in life, though.
It's just not worth it. But
one more thing. So we have these feelings that we get fulfillment from. Mm-hmm. Helping each other makes us feel really good.
Yeah.
And it's good for us. Mm-hmm. It helps everyone. Whenever we help each other, everyone benefits from it. There's mm-hmm. no harm done. But why do we feel that way? Why are we inclined that way? What moves us to even want to be a helpful, quote-unquote, people? We could just, according to, probability or whatever, we could get the enjoyment from slaying each other. Mm-hmm. That our purpose, our feeling, our fulfillment could be from killing each other. And there's no doubt that as far as like vengeance goes, there's a sense of fulfillment. If someone does something wrong to you and you get them back, you feel better about it.
Yeah.
But someone suffered at the end of that. What we consider suffering. Yeah. If there was another culture where they consider suffering living, that it's your job to exterminate life because life is a terrible thing, they would get their fulfillment from killing each other. The fact that we're all born and without having, being taught explicitly that it's better to help each other, we still feel better whenever we get a hug or whenever our mom gives us a kiss or that we're held by someone that we care about without having to learn or read or, someone teaches or walk it through with us. We feel those things. We're not inclined. We could just as easily, if it were just up to chance, we could just as easily be inclined to be the slaying race. And the fact that we're not means that, to me, whoever made us, if you believe that, someone else made us, I believe that Yahweh made us, that we're made with those attributes because those are his attributes and we're his children. He's not one to just slay his people for no reason and give them fulfillment out of it. That he cares about us and therefore us caring about each other brings us closer to godlyhood. To me, like, if you have to explain why we do the things we do, if you could do that, then, as opposed to some contrary nature, that to me would it would just open the floodgates for everyone to just jump on board with being who we are. But
I do have, I'm piecing together little rebuttals for each of those little thingies that you're putting
go ahead,
out.
Go ahead.
I mean, we don't have to, because the more we go into it, the less fun the conversation becomes.
All right.
But to sort of sum it up is that it helped us to continue to be loving as a human species and so on. And so our brains have adapted accordingly.
Because loving is how we're wired.
No, the other way around. The behavior happened, and then our brains adapted to like it.
But only because, going forward with life is what we feel like we're supposed to do. No one's born feeling like they need to immediately die. We're born wanting to continue living.
No, I know, but life continues living. The first amoeba cell thing didn't want. It didn't think. It just
wanted to go.
It just did.
Right.
But
that's the compelling force, though, is to keep going forward.
Exactly. Life. And nature has a way of regulating things via survival. So, in the way that if we apply it to, the amoeba, if it went into an acid bath or whatever, or, waters that had a slightly higher pH that would kill it, or lower, actually. Is it lower?
Low pH is more acidic.
That's right. Okay.
Higher is more basic.
I took a physical science class earlier, didn't I? But the ones that went into the more acidic waters would die, and the ones that didn't would live.
Right.
And so the ones that lived just continued not going into the acidic water.
Right.
And maybe there were some that kind of went into it a little bit and were like, oh crap, that sucks. And so they adapted as it kept going. And so in that same way, the behavior came before the liking it. And so the easiest way that I explain it is that if mothers hadn't learned to love the child, we would have gotten rid of babies so long ago. Babies are annoying, they're loud, they keep us from sleeping, they crap everywhere. Why would anyone take care of a baby?
Yeah, that was really the question, though. I mean, the mom wouldn't be there either.
Exactly.
Like, the first people to figure that out would have died right then and there.
Exactly. So the ones that did take care of the baby anyways, that thing continued to adapt in the brain to where the brain put a thing there, and I'm explaining it in very crude terms because I'm not a neuroscientist. The brain put a thing there to go, all right, that baby thing, take care of it so that the future generation doesn't die.
But see, here's the difference, though. Like, the link between amoebas and humans is that we have cognizance. That cells, that are each individual cells, are essentially machines. Though they contain the life force to want to go forward, they don't think for themselves. A lot of things in life, they go through their cycle. Stars go through their cycle where they get big and hot and then they die and they turn cold or black hole. They have their cycle, but they're not cognizant as far as we know. But, like, why us? Why life? Why does life have cognizance? That's something that you can't explain away, why we're not. If we did come from what led to the best survival, then why we're not just machines like our cells are. Why the human body has, like, a seemingly soul or, you know, cognizance.
My explanation for that is just random.
Some say random.
Yeah. That it just keeps going, and the entropy does not reverse. There was a cool short story. I forget who wrote it, but it was like the last question ever asked. It was like a mini like science fiction thing, and like as you know, first it was like people going, "Oh yeah, but how do we reverse entropy?" And then it was this bigger sort of amorphous large organism planetary thing was, "Oh yeah, but we built the supercomputer that can think of it. How do we reverse entropy?" And then it eventually became these galaxies having a conversation between one another, and then the galaxies were like, "Yeah, but how do we reverse entropy?" And then like it's kind of ended because you can't.
Right.
The randomness continues, but it has a self-regulating trend through what exists and what doesn't. And so we only see what continues to exist. And what continues to exist randomly. There's probably so many more things that have ceased to exist than continue to exist. Obviously, there's most people in the world are dead.
Yeah.
That's a joke from Louis C.K. That, you know, you could say most people in the world are in China or India, but, you know, most, if you count living and dead, most people are dead.
But they're dead because they lack their cognizance, not because their molecules or atoms have disappeared, though.
Sure. Yeah.
Like the person as we know it is gone.
Yeah.
But that their particles still remain on this earth.
Yeah.
You and I are composed of dead people.
Yeah, and stardust.
Right.
So the randomness continues.
To me, like, there's just because of the vast universe and its infiniteness, I can't take my cognizance as a random. That the universe is so wide and so infinite that for me that we can see really, really far away. Definitely not even like close to probably however infinite the universe is.
Yeah.
But of all the things that we can observe billions of billions and billions of things.
Oh yeah.
But none of them are cognizant like we have here on this earth. I can't accept
as we know yet.
Right, as we know yet. And that I can't accept that my ability to think and love, that my emotions are random, that I didn't just turn into a machine.
Sure.
Like a star,
Yeah,
or you know, like a galaxy,
yeah,
or a black hole. That I'm not down to my mechanics. That I have feelings and emotions, and they don't exist for a logical reason. If it was just to ensure survival, there would be better ways of doing that.
And I'm sorry that this devolved into like this conversation.
That's all right, Santiago. Well, hey, I mean, they're getting a feel for who we are as people.
Yeah. Because I'm not trying to convince you.
No,
I'm just explaining myself. Right. And I don't even want to convince you.
No, that's fine. You don't know what better conversation to really get a glance of like how people are than to listen to this one and be like, yeah, I know Santiago. I know Tiger now just by listening to them talk about this.
Yeah. It's just, I'm okay with that.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad that you are. I'm grateful that you're a person like that.
Yeah. Because it's still so enjoyable.
It is.
Even if it doesn't mean anything.
Right. If you can't explain it, or if you can explain it.
It doesn't matter because it's still pretty great.
Right.
Life is pretty great, Tiger.
It's good. I can't deny.
And I really like it. If I had to choose between living and not living forever.
Well, no. Hold on there, Santiago. You're questioning the gift of mortality, Santiago.
Well, okay, so not mortality, but if I had to live for a short time, or just not live forever.
Wait, live for a short time or not live forever?
Yeah, because, like, if I could choose between never having existed and never going to exist, or living for the measly amount of time that I am a human being.
Oh. All right, I get what you're saying.
I would take all of that,
Yeah.
2 milliseconds to 100 years of life.
Mm-hmm.
Every time.
Yeah.
It's pretty great. And, I mean, yeah, with that stuff, it's pretty great. And I don't know, there's a lot of people that are very, nihilistic, that just go, life sucks and the void will eat you, and it's just bad. But nah, even the bad stuff is pretty great too.
The fact that you can be there to experience it means something.
Mm-hmm. And also the fact that if stuff didn't suck, then we wouldn't realize how good good is.
Yeah, you have to have the temperament of both of
them. But yeah, I don't mind making this even a little bit longer, just to hear you explain a little bit of Tolkien lore.
All right, thanks, Santiago. Well, we can kind of touch about something that was discussed just then. In Tolkienian lore, John Ronald Reuel Tolkien, the father of modern fantasy.
John Railroad Tolkien.
Anyways, he has a couple of books and like short stories, and a lot of them are compiled into one series or one volume called the Silmarillion. Mm-hmm. And so in it, there's the Valar at the beginning, and they're essentially, like, maybe we would call them angels, but they're more akin to like gods. Mm-hmm. And they, through the creator, Iluvatar, who we call Eru in Sindarin tongue, which is like Elvish language.
Remember earlier how I said that, like, you could just take anything in Tolkienian lore and just throw some funny syllables together, and it'll just sound pretty good anyways.
Well, he based his language off of the Welsh language, because it was a very smooth sounding. That's the basis for the Elven language. That before he was a story writer, linguistics. The man is a serious champion of etymology, that he comprised just entire languages for his stories. He didn't just make up some words here and there and say that these are the words in that language. Alphabet, pronunciation, everything. He has entire languages.
That's really great.
There are Bibles written in Elvish. Pretty crazy. But anyways, so in his story, the Ayundale, the Song of the Valar, the Valanquinta is the Song of the Valar, but through Iluvatar, he gives them the great music. And so through the music, they begin to sing, and they can't perceive anything except for their own voices. As far as they can't see anything and they can't touch anything, but they know that they have voices and that they can hear them. And so probably not even with ears as we know that, but that just their spirits feel the song.
Sure.
And so they each have a theme that they're to sing. And so through their singing, they bring the world, the universe, EA, which means the world that is, into existence. And so once he shows them Arda, what we call Earth, he says that I need someone to govern it. And so whoever amongst you will go, then you will govern the world and its powers. And so among the Valar, there are 7 princes and 7 princesses, or kings and queens, however you want to call it. They go down to Arda, Earth, and they begin to govern its forces. And so, like, the head is Manwë, and his dominion is air and the skies and eagles, and he's the king of Arda. He's the king of the world. It is his to govern. And his counterpart, Melkor, or Morgoth, however you want to call him. But anyways, I was wanting to get to what we were talking about before. Their job is to oversee the world, the Valar, but something that they didn't know about, the themes that they sang had Iluvatar's plans for had all their destinies intertwined together. Okay. And so something that they didn't know about, that they had sung but they didn't perceive, was the children of Iluvatar. And elves and men are the children of Iluvatar.
Okay.
The elves are the first comers, and they call humans the second comers.
Okay.
And so elves, if you know Tolkien lore, you know that they don't die except from battle or a broken heart. If their despair is so great that they can't stand it, then they grow so weary that they can pass away that way. But they will never...
So cheesy and beautiful.
I love it.
It's great.
I just read it and it enchants my heart when I read it. So yeah, they can't die. They can't die from age or from sickness. They die far less from happenstance like humans do. Like one bad fall and we can die.
Yeah.
And so elves, you think about it and you think, I would like to live forever. I'd like to live like the elves, construct these grand, edifices and temples in the mountains and these awesome villages in the trees. Who wouldn't want to live like that? Men suck. Why are we like we are? But then you read, and Tolkien is very thorough in his coverage of, a lot of different things that we go through in life. And one of them is the mortality of man. But in the way that humans see it as our time is cut short, we didn't get to experience all the things we wanted to do. Tolkien takes it and he makes it into something beautiful. The mortality of man is a gift.
Yeah.
And it's called, he uses the word doom a lot. And fun fact, doom just means fate. Whenever we think of doom, we think of something bad that you can't avoid. But fate is what doom is. And so... in Tolkien, he calls it the doom of men, or the gift of men, the destiny of men, that we would live shorter. And because we live shorter, at first the elves perceive us as sickly and weak, and that because we live shorter, that we're not as grand as they, and they kind of question, why did he make us to begin with? But something beautiful about our mortality is that the things that we choose to do with our time and how we spend it are that much more precious to us because they're so short. The elves can't perceive beauty even. We think of elves as the most beautiful people that, they have these intricate woodworks and they have centuries to master fighting and woodcraft and sewing and song singing. The elves are very renowned for their song singing.
Can that just all be boiled down into boredom? It's man, that is a really beautiful sword. It's I had 200 years to carve it. I just did it by hand, and come on.
We perceive beauty differently. That what we would see as they're just bored, they're working on stuff. They see it as constantly perfecting their craft.
Sure.
That they see beauty in the world as things that they make, and it's really kind of hard for them to think about what it means to have a grand destiny and how it affects your life beyond. Because for elves, there is no life beyond. They live forever. They don't have any notion about going to the spirits because they live forever.
Yeah.
and it doesn't mean anything to them to have, an impact in the life to come. Everything that they do here. It's temporal to us, but to them it's eternal. And so for us, what gives us, the beauty and so much more, where elves would construct a garden and make it so that, these flowers are here and they complement this tree or whatever, we could just take one flower, look at it, and see just how short that it lives, that we see ourselves in it, and that it's so beautiful because it's there, and it's not going to be forever.
Yeah.
So in the same way that whatever humans they choose to do, it's that much more important to them because their time is short. That's what Tolkien calls the gift of, or that's what Iluvatar gives men as their gift, the gift of mortality. That the fire, they call it the sacred fire, that what we would call a spirit, that it burns within everything, but that in men it burns the hottest, and that it burns so warm that it consumes us slowly. But because it burns so hot, we're more spirited in everything that we do, that we seek more, farther, faster, and stronger than the elves do, or any other thing that has life in it. I think that's something that Tolkien really does well. Whereas we see kind of death as the cheating of our lives, and that it's the end of it, and that it was, so short we didn't get to do what we wanted. But you have to, think that your life is only so short. Do what you want to do with it. Don't waste it away on stuff that doesn't matter. It really is kind of a reality check if you can perceive it that way. A lot of people have trouble reading Tolkien because they say it reads like a history book or like it's a textbook. But his world building is in a masterful class all on its own. I just love everything that he does. But a lot of things can be learned from reading him. He can give you a lot of insight. There's a whole lot of stuff that happens in the Valenquinta and in the Ayandale, like the making of Middle-earth and the Song of the Valar, that you look at it and you reflect upon like what that really means in your life. And ultimately, and this is Tolkien's intention, that what he wanted his story, that at least those stories to be, were the precursors for how our world is today. That it's not just a fantasy world that he wanted to make. He wanted that to be the origin stories of his people. His people, the Brits, their nation was conquered and resettled so many times by different armies that the people themselves essentially lost their culture. The stories that they did have were from other cultures. And so he wanted his people to have a native lore. And to him, and because Middle-earth, a lot of the places are parallels to where other locations are today, he wanted to set up Middle-earth as the precursor for what our world is now. One other thing, too, about the mortality of men. In the Bible, he correlates a lot of things that happen, specifically Genesis style, to the Bible. He had a lot to do with Catholicism and with Methodism. And so he knew his Bible. And drawing up a lot of the things that he did for the Valenquinta and the Silmarillion, he almost made it so that the start of Middle-earth, you can read it as almost an addition to Genesis. Almost. There's no story of Adam and Eve in Middle-earth Silmarillion. But there is something else that I thought was pretty interesting. In the Bible, it talks about how men used to live for centuries. That the oldest man recorded in the Bible, Methuselah, lived to be 696 years old. Or think it was 960, one of the two. I'm pretty sure it was 600. He lived to be a really long time, and you have to wonder, why don't we live that long anymore? Most people are lucky to see 100. To live for 6 centuries, that would be an incredibly long time. And in the Bible, it explains it that it's very short. There's really not a lot for you to imagine. You just almost read by it, and it just passes you. You don't even think about it. That the children of men, or the children of God, perceivably, they're talking about the angels, came and took wives amongst the women of the land. Some people say it was men, other people say it was angels. It doesn't really matter to me that much. But that these people were the heroes of old and the men of renown. That is literally what the Bible says. And so these guys, whoever they were powerful. Yeah. And they lived a long time.
Yeah.
Tolkien takes that to a whole nother level in the Silmarillion. There are these people called the Númenóreans, and whenever men come, they do live short lives. Mm-hmm. But the people of Númenor, and they get there through this long, lengthy process. I won't go into the whole thing here. But they essentially gain, like, the blessing of the gods, and they can live forever. And they become the Edain. And people think of, like, Aragorn, that he's Edain, or they call him the Dunedain, that he's one of the last, like, race of men that lived for a really long time. That's why he's lived so long, is because his ancestors were the Númenóreans. Yeah. But what happens in Tolkien's version of that short Bible verse, where it talks about the men who lived forever, God shortened their lifespan, so that they shouldn't live forever. He saw that men were becoming so powerful that he had to cleanse the world, flood style, Noah style. And, it's a very tragic thing, but you read by that and you wonder, what could people have done, really, so that God had to, start all over again? Think about the splendor that you had to have, the power and the might that you had to possess for God himself to have to personally get involved to cleanse the world. This is something that Tolkien addresses. Yeah. The people called the Númenóreans, they live in an island called Númenor, and they're the Edain people. They live for a long time, and they become almost unmatched as far as military goes. Sure. And in Tolkien lore, Middle-earth has this place called Valinor, the Undying Lands. At the very end of The Lord of the Rings, you see Frodo and some of the other guys. They get on the boat, and they're going to Valinor. They're going to the Undying Lands. That is almost like Garden of Eden style in Middle-earth. But in Tolkien's story, the Númenóreans, these men who have achieved this long-lasting life and this unmatched military prowess, unmatched even by the elves, they take down the big bad guy. They take down Melkor, and Sauron is afraid of them. Yeah. Like, these guys are some bad dudes. They sail against Valinor. They sail to make war against the gods themselves. And the gods, they're not like gods like we think of them, where they could just, snap your fingers and you die. Yeah. They govern the earth's powers, but they're not in control of your life. They can't snuff your life out that quickly. These guys had so much strength that the gods themselves, like, fell to their knees and said that there's nothing we can do to stop them if they want to make war on the land. Sure, they could, take out some of them, but it's not their place to interfere with mortal destiny. That's not something that they're supposed to do. So they literally have to turn to the Creator and ask him, please do something. Tolkien explains all that beautifully, whereas whenever we read it in the Old Testament, it's just, these guys were really powerful, God cleansed the earth. And so there's, like, a whole bunch that you can imagine in between that, but most people just read by it, and it doesn't mean anything to them. The Bible says people used to live forever. All right. Well, now they don't. So what? But that it has a lot more meaning to it, that men had, the power, and they had the ability to do masterful things and live forever. Sure. But they still turned, like, bad because of it. And it's all explained really well in the Silmarillion. But that's also something that I really like about it. That it connects in that way.
Yeah, that's really good. So I guess going with that trend of mortality, I said, like, think of advice that you have for people in the last one. Do you have another one relating to this? Because I have one.
I would just say that if you really feel like you're having a hard time enjoying life and you're listening to this, talk to someone who you think is like Santiago or I, or try to contact us.
Or just talk to me.
Just try to contact us.
Go on our website.
Life is really worth living, and it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. So lovely. It's meant to be enjoyed.
Yeah. Just piggybacking off of that. Life has so much to enjoy, and however short or painful it might seem at times, this is the greatest thing you're ever going to experience. And when you make the most of it, it just makes it that much better. that your experience can be just wondrous. And this is, for me, this is the only thing that I think I'm going to get. And so I want to enjoy it as much as possible. I want to have the people around me smile and make me smile. Look around. Enjoy living.
Can I offer the other side to that?
Go for it.
I believe that we're here to serve God, that God puts us here with a purpose, and that, sure, we have heaven to look forward to, but that God calls us here, He puts us here, and that we have a path that we're supposed to walk. We have goals that are supposed to be done here on earth, and it's not our place to try and cut those short, that God calls us to live a great life and to influence and be a good light to those around us. A lot of people, I've heard the quip that if you think heaven is waiting for you, why don't you just kill yourself and go there? Pretty harsh, but just, if you're a person of faith, that remember you're supposed to do great things here.
Do great things. Be good to people.
And that people love you no matter what. And there's nothing so brutal that you've done or shameful that you've done that you cannot come back from. People have perceptions that I've done this thing that's so terrible, there's no way I could ever be anything.
Yeah, that's silly.
And they throw their lives down the drain in a lot of different ways.
That's even sillier.
It is. So there's nothing so bad that you can't come back from. Life is to be enjoyed.
Do good in the world. And with that, I'm Santiago Ramones.
I'm Garrett Tiger Gertie.
Thank you for listening. Hello and again, welcome to Bit Death, because I don't have an intro thing for this one. Yeah, love never fails. It's going to be okay. I might be wrong. Thanks for listening.